When you read the Book of Ruth, what you see, in a sense, is the story of Naomi primarily, but also of Ruth. And I just want to take a few moments just to look at the story, or the overview of the story of of Naomi. And then we'll come on to Ruth in a bit. I think Naomi is such an important story because I think it encapsulates for us what the gospel story is. Let me explain why, just by pointing to, in a sense, the 4 different chapters in the Book of Ruth. Firstly, we see in chapter 1 that Naomi and her family have wandered away from God. They've wandered away from the land that God has given them and gone to live with the Moabites. Now, this is expressly forbidden. Deuteronomy 23 talks a little bit about this because of the historical enmity of the Moabites, going as far back as Abraham, but particularly in Moses' time when they went against God's people. But also theologically, because here are people who've moved away from the worship of God and are trying to do everything to undermine that. So they were forbidden to go there, whether out of prosperity or out of need. And yet that's what they do. And it's interesting in verse 12 of chapter 1, where Naomi seems to imply that actually the reason that she is broken and has nothing is because of God's punishment for their disobedience. So chapter 1 begins with the really, really sad story of Naomi and her wandering away. But also, she returns in chapter 1. She returns to the Lord, not just his people, but the place in which God has given them to live. But she returns empty-handed. She has nothing. Any of the prosperity or the blessings that she hoped for in the land of Moab have been stripped away from her. And so she returns to God empty-handed. And not even graciously, really. We read that she says that her name is no longer Naomi, but her name is Mara. She is bitter about what she has done and what the Lord has done to her. So although she doesn't question God's sovereignty, she certainly isn't appreciative at this point. But yet, to the Lord she has returned. To his people and to his law she has returned. And then what we see unfolding in chapters 2 and 3 is God's redemption for her. It comes in a number of different ways. It is provision for her in terms of food, but also the fact that her land and what she has is bought back. The word actually is redeemed. We see that wonderful, wonderful story of grace at work. As the one who has nothing, suddenly it is bought back literally and has a future and a hope. And of course, that wonderful picture in chapter 4, when the baby is, Ruth and Boaz's baby is born, it's in Naomi's lap that this baby sits. And it's the women of Bethlehem who name this child. This child, of course, that is the grandfather of King David, and as we know, is in the genealogy of Jesus. She experiences God's blessing on her and her community. And even though she's wandered away, she has come back. And because of that moment of redemption, she sees those blessings. Of course, it's great, isn't it, to see that this gospel story is lived out, not just in Naomi's life, but in each and every one of us. Of course, that's the Bible story from beginning to end, isn't it? How right from the beginning, Adam and Eve have wandered away from God. They've left the Garden of Eden, the place of his presence. And what is true of them is true of all humanity, that we all wander away, that we all turn our backs on God's wonderful provision and law and goodness. But actually also, there are those who return to the Lord, as we're reminded so powerfully by Jesus in the parable of the lost sons, of the one who goes away and comes back. That is our story too, that it doesn't matter how far we've wandered or for how long, but actually that when we return to the Lord, he is there, arms open, welcoming us, greeting us as children, beloved, longed for. And of course, we know that that's possible because of the redemption bought for us by Jesus Christ. And the blessings that we enjoy, his presence, his Holy Spirit, the promise of being with him in all eternity. And it's great, isn't it, just to see that snapshot of how the gospel works in this book of Ruth. Old and New Testament overlapping, same idea, same story, same God, same redemption. So as we've been doing, if you've been listening to this, then we'd love you actually to maybe have an opportunity to discuss some of the questions with others. And so some just questions for you to think about. We began with the gospel story. What's the gospel story like in your own life? Do you see that same rhythm? Or maybe in the lives of others or those that you pray for? What is a comfort for you in that? What is a challenge? And actually, if you are still in the wandering stage, what would it bring about for you if you were to return?